All right, we're going to continue our Bible in a Year plan using the Charles Stanley Life Principles Daily Bible. Seems like we're getting close to the end of John, and we are in 2 Kings 5 through 6. And there's a lot that happens in 2 Kings 5 through 6. So we'll just start off talking about Naaman, hopefully saying that right, who's the commander of the army of the king of Syria. He was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor, but a leper. So we have this picture of this mighty commander who even God seems to be working through, or at least has given him a victory, and he has leprosy. So they find out that he might be able to be healed of leprosy from the one true God. So he writes a letter to the king of Israel, and it says, "Now be advised when this letter comes to you that I have sent Naaman my servant to you, that you may heal him of his leprosy." And it happened when the king of Israel read the letter that he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to kill and make alive, that this man sends a man to me to heal him of his leprosy? Therefore, please consider and see how he seeks a quarrel with me." So the king of Israel reads the letter, and he seems to have no faith in God whatsoever. He seems to only be thinking about himself. Oh, how am I going to heal this man of leprosy? And this is some sort of trap, or he's instigating a problem, and then we're going to have a quarrel. He's just thinking about himself, doesn't have very much faith in God. And contrast that with Elisha's response. So it was when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Please let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Elisha not only kind of rebukes the king, like, "What are you even doing?" It almost reminds me of when God a little bit, you wouldn't say rebukes Elijah when he's in the cave, but he's like, "What are you doing in here?" It's just when we're maybe thinking about ourselves too much and not thinking about the power of God and what he can do. So Naaman goes to Elisha's house. And interesting, Elisha doesn't come out to greet him. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean." So pretty straightforward, pretty simple. He's saying, hey, go wash in the Jordan, you'll be clean. He actually doesn't even say it. His servant says it to Naaman. But Naaman doesn't like that. The very next words are, "But Naaman became furious and went away and said, 'Indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and heal the leprosy.'" So first off, he's saying, you don't even come out to me, you send a servant? Like, am I so undignified that it's not a great honor for you to speak to me? And I thought there was going to be this big ceremony of healing, that there was going to be some performance to it, some big thing, not just go wash in the river. And even that, the river itself is offensive to Naaman. He says, "Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. But then his servants come forward. They basically says, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, 'Wash and be clean'?" So they're saying, if he asked you to do some great thing to be healed of your leprosy, you would have done that. So why would you not do this simple thing to be healed of your leprosy? So he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. And wanted to just get that portion of the story right, because it's a pretty interesting story. It's another one in the line that seems to be pointing to Jesus very well. We've read about Elijah and Elisha bringing people back from the dead, children. That's what Jesus did as well. We've read about, I believe it was Elisha yesterday, multiplied food, and there was abundance and even some left over. And now there's the healing of leprosy. So it seems that these are some very key prophets. Elijah, certainly a key prophet. He's one of two people in the entire Bible who doesn't die. And now Elisha is, the torch has been passed to him, and he seems to be doing quite well as well. So here's the response. And he returned to the man of God, he and all his aides, and came and stood before him, and he said, "Indeed, now I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Now, therefore, please take a gift from your servant." And he said, "As the Lord lives before whom I stand, I will receive nothing." And he urged him to take it, but he refused. So we'll get into that second part in just a moment. But first, indeed, now I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. That seems to be what God was pointing to this entire time. So he has leprosy, seems to be an outsider as well. He comes in, and he's the commander of Syria. And the first sign, you could say a sign, is that Elisha doesn't go out to him. He doesn't do some big performance over him. And then he washes in the Jordan, which my girlfriend said she saw in her study Bible that the Jordan was considered kind of a small, even maybe dirty river, especially compared to those other ones that he named. And I mean, he even says these other rivers are better than the Jordan. So, I mean, first off, why isn't it some big performance to heal him? Second off, if you're going to pick a river to dip in, why do you have to come down to the Jordan? Why couldn't you do it in these better rivers? And it seems that that is the point. And even the third part is also the point, where he offers, he says, "Please take a gift from your servant." But he says, "As the Lord lives before whom I stand, I will receive nothing." And he urged him to take it, but he refused. See how all of these point to God. If Elisha had come out and done some big performance, it would have seemed more like it was him doing the healing than God. If he had said, "Wash in some grand river," or "Go under this big waterfall," it might have seemed like the river or the waterfall had the healing powers. But the fact that he chose, you could say, a humble river, something like the Jordan, then points to God, because it's not the small, dirty river that's going to heal you. It must be how God is healing you through that. And then the same thing when he offers a gift to Elisha and Elisha refuses, it then points to God as well, where he's saying, "I can't accept this gift because that'd be wrong. It was God who brought this healing, not me." And all of those things just point perfectly to the fact that he now sees that there is no God in all the earth except the one that's in Israel. So cool how God works in all these ways. But he also works in other ways as well. And we're going to read about some of the judgment. And it actually kind of stems off of where we ended there with Elisha not accepting any payment. Apparently, Elisha has a servant named Gehazi who didn't really like that no payment aspect. So he engages in a deception, and he gets some money from Naaman, which is, again, what Elijah didn't want to happen. And Elijah even asks him, he says, "Where did you go, Gehazi?" And he says, "Your servant did not go anywhere." So Gehazi not only deceives Naaman and gets money from Naaman, but then now he's lying to Elisha. And then Elisha's response is just amazing. Imagine lying to a prophet of God, someone who speaks with God, and you think you're going to fool him. Then he said to him, "Did not my heart go with you when the man turned back from his chariot to meet you? Is it time to receive money and time to receive clothing, olive groves and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male and female servants?" So he's rebuking him. He's saying, we're not doing this for the riches. We're not doing this for olive groves. We're not doing this to be given servants, to be given anything. We're doing this because God is calling us to do this. We want to bring him glory. Think of what happened out of this miracle of the healing of the leprosy. This man now believes in God. And Gehazi seems to just be thinking about himself. So what's the takeaway on this one? Well, the takeaway seems to be you don't get into religion or Christianity in order to get wealth. You don't study the Bible so that you can get rich. You study the Bible so that you can know and love God and serve Him better to bring Him glory. That's what we're doing this for. And that's where true joy and fulfillment comes from. Not all these other things like riches or fame or glory for ourselves. And the proverb we'll be reading today actually connects pretty well with that. And then just wrapping up this whole story, because that's the end of 2 Kings 5. It also just points to humility in general. This commander wasn't ready to be healed when he was demanding things be done in a certain way. He was ready to be healed when he humbled himself to go in some small dirty river, and he was healed. The opposite happens to Gehazi. Therefore, the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and your descendants forever. And he went out from his presence leprous, as white as snow. So while Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, is healed of his leprosy, Gehazi, the servant of a prophet, is given leprosy because of his deception and his greed of putting something above God. And then it gets into an interesting little tidbit here, a small little story, where they're down at the Jordan, and they seem to be wanting to build something, so they're cutting down trees, and then an axe head falls in the water. So the man of God said, "Where did it fall?" And he showed him the place. So he cut off a stick, threw it in there, and made the iron float. Therefore he said, "Pick it up for yourself." So he reached out his hand and took it. So after this grand story of the healing of leprosy, there's this interesting little story about, now they're chopping down some trees, the axe head falls in the water, and then a miracle happens, they get the axe head back. And the reason he wants it back so bad is he says, "I borrowed it, that wasn't even mine." Amazing little story here that just shows God's not only interested in the big things, He's also interested in the small things. He's not just interested in these battles and these kings, He's interested in our day-to-day lives, and not even big things in our day-to-day lives. Something as small as an axe head that we borrowed falling in a river. And I think we should be the same way. Obviously, we want to have our eyes on the biggest thing, which is God, and trying to think and, or more so, listen to what He's telling us to do to bring glory to His kingdom. And it'd be right to want to go about that in the biggest way possible, to bring as many people to Him as possible, to learn as much about the gospel as you can as possible, and to share that to the world. Those are big things that I think we should be excited about and want to do as well as we possibly can. But there's also just the tiny things as well. And this could sound a bit cliche, because you can get into like, oh, opening the door for someone, and those can become a bit like, oh, the word might be contrite, I don't know. But those things do matter. Just getting up and helping someone when you don't really need to, and then maybe getting up again and helping them again. People notice that, and it's how we provide a witness for Christ, how people see that we're different from the world around us, that we're serving, and in a way that isn't serving so that we can get something back, but just serving because that's what we're called to do. We understand everything God has given us, and we're filled with that love. So we don't feel this need to be like Gehazi, where we're snatching and trying to grab things and get as much as we can for ourselves. We have everything we need. So with that abundance, we can pour it out on others, whether that's in our time or our resources. Not only to be a witness to others, but also to practice. If you practice serving in those small ways, then it's going to become second nature when God calls you to sacrifice and serve in much larger ways. Faithful over a little, faithful over much. So God sees the small things, we should as well. But then it gets back into big things. Imagine they're surrounded by an army. So he answered, "Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And Elisha prayed and said, "Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see." Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So when the Syrians came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, "Strike this people, I will pray with blindness." And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. Start off on the end there. He could pray for these Syrians who are surrounding them, trying to kill them, for them just to be destroyed. But interestingly, he prays for blindness instead, which could show that God is actually looking for repentance and reconciliation. I don't know if you'd call it reconciliation because the Syrians weren't ever with him, but just repentance in general, have a heart that's turned towards them. I mean, Naaman, he was commander of the king of Syria, and he came to God. And it seems that God maybe has a little bit of a plan here as well, where he's not just going to destroy them, he blinds them. But he also brings, it says, then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. It's not because he was blind, and he couldn't see anything, and then the Lord unblinded him, but it's more that he was blind to the power of the Lord. When he opens his eyes, or when the Lord opens his eyes, he sees the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So this something that we can look at and realize that we are not alone. It's almost like Jesus on the cross. I don't know if he says this or thinks this, but it's basically, do you think I could not call a legion of angels down right now and just take out all of the Romans, all these people who are mocking me? Christ could do that, but he doesn't do that. But the angels are there. We saw that when Jesus was tempted in the wilderness by Satan. That after he goes through the temptations, then the angels minister to him, showing that when Satan's saying, "Oh, jump off the temple and the angels will save you," Jesus says, "I will not put the Lord my God to the test." That story ends with the angels ministering to him, showing that the angels were there the whole time. And here where this young man thinks that they're outnumbered and they're about to die, and maybe he's giving into despair, Elisha, or the Lord, opens his eyes and he sees, oh, the power of the Lord is so much greater than I ever could have imagined. We should remember that in our today lives as well. And it actually connects with something we'll be reading in John. Now when the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elijah, "My father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them?" So they bring back some of these captives, and the king of Israel is thinking, should we kill them? Elisha has an interesting answer, but he answered, "You shall not kill them. Would you kill those whom you have taken captive with your sword and your bow? Set food and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master." Then he prepared a great feast for them, and after they ate and drank, he sent them away, and they went to their master. So instead of killing the enemy, he gives them a feast. And it almost reminds me of this idea of defeating evil with kindness. A verse that comes to mind is the one that whoever your enemy is, be kind to them, and it'll heap burning coals on their head. It almost reminds me of a feud in Ireland or something between two families, the Hatfields and McCoys. I think that's one. That might be in America, I don't know. But you do wrong, then you do wrong, then you get back, then you get vengeance. And here we're seeing that God's mercy actually puts an end to that cycle. It is what stops that cycle and brings about peace. And we see it at the end here. So the bands of Syrian raiders came no more into the land of Israel. So if the king of Israel had killed them, then most likely Syrians would say, oh, they killed our guys. We're going to go back in there and raid them and kill them. But because they were shown such kindness when they knew they didn't deserve it, it brought about peace. So that clearly points to Christ and how he says, love your enemies. That is how you end that cycle of sin and death and destruction. And then we're just going to skip to this last verse, which is kind of interesting. There's some siege that's been going on a very long time. And then the king said, surely this calamity is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer? So it's something that's been drawing out. Maybe he's been calling out to the Lord, but it just seems like it's been too long and he is ready. And this just reminds me of how the Lord does seem to work sometimes. Sometimes he lets us get to the end of our rope where we realize that we don't have control, that there's nothing that we can do to make this happen faster, where we realize I am just waiting for the Lord, but I'm tired of waiting for the Lord. Like, God, please just act. And it's usually in that moment where we fully surrender, where we say, God, all right, your will be done. When we admit defeat, that then God realizes that we're ready. I don't know if realize is the right word there, but it's often we have to be brought low. We have to surrender before God will give us maybe what we want. And the reason for that is because if he gives it to us before we're ready, we might have the illusion that it came about because of something we did. Goes back to Naaman. If Elisha had healed in some big way, or there was some big river, or he had received gifts, it wouldn't have pointed to God as much. Where when we get to the point where we throw up our hands and then it comes about, then it clearly points to God. We'll make it practical because I've been saying things somewhat abstractly here. Let's say you're looking for a girlfriend because ultimately you're looking for a wife. And you're trying to control the situation so much, trying to make things happen, and it's just not working out. And you know it's not working out. And then you finally just surrender to God and you say, God, all right, your will be done. Doesn't mean, okay, I'm going to sit on my couch and I'm going to wait for you to have a girl show up at my front door. But it is saying, all right, I'm going to let go of the things you're clearly telling me to let go of. And I'm going to keep my hands open and see if you bring anyone into my life. And if you do, I'm going to be faithful and work towards that. But always in alignment with your will. And if you're calling me to singleness, then that will be my path as well. And it's almost in that moment where God says, okay, now you're ready. And then if he brings someone just perfect into your life, then it's less of, oh, I got this girl because of these things that I did. It's more God brought her into my life. And what an amazing blessing she is. Then we get into our Psalm 72, 1-7. It's a Psalm of Solomon. Give the king your judgments, O God, and your righteousness to the king's son. You will judge your people with righteousness, and your poor with justice. The mountains will bring peace to the people, and the little hills by righteousness. He will bring justice to the poor of the people. He will save the children of the needy, and will break in pieces the oppressor. They shall fear you as long as the sun and moon endure, throughout all generations. Shall come down like rain upon the grass before mowing, like showers that water the earth. In his days the righteous shall flourish, an abundance of peace, until the moon is no more. Lots of great imagery here. Mountains will bring peace to the people. You have this, they'll fear you as long as the sun and the moon endure. Shall come down like rain upon the grass that showers and waters the earth. flourish, abundance, peace, until the moon is no more. It's giving us this idea that God is life eternal. I think that's the best, most concise way to summarize that one. Proverbs 18, 10 through 11. This is the one that connects a little bit with what we were reading earlier. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. The rich man's wealth is his strong city, like a high wall in his own esteem. So here we have what seems to be a contrast. There's the person who trusts in God, where the Lord is his strong tower. The righteous run to him, and they are safe. That is the only stable ground, God. Whereas the rich man's wealth is his strong city. So where does the rich man get his stability? It's from his own wealth. He thinks that gives him the ability to control his surroundings enough to the point where he feels stable. But that never works. And that's why people who think that way always need more money. Because they think, oh, the reason I don't feel stable and secure, or I don't feel like I have peace, is because I don't have enough money. So I need more, and maybe that will bring me the stability I'm looking for. It doesn't. Because it's not supposed to. God is the only place where you are truly safe. So trust in him. Now we get into John 18, 1 through 18. When Jesus had spoken these words, and the way that connects with our reading earlier is, think about Naaman. He, at first, wasn't too happy about how things were going around, but then he trusted in the Lord, and his leprosy was healed. Whereas Gehazi, he's more focused on his riches, and he ends up with leprosy. That's a perfect little metaphor for how what you prioritize in your life will end up either bringing you life or death. John 18, 1 through 18. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. This is the Garden of Gethsemane. Seems that the other Gospels go into more detail about the Garden of Gethsemane. This is where Jesus prays to the Father and says, take this cup from me, but not as I will, but your will be done. Something along those lines. And it's such an intense prayer and surrender that he's literally sweating blood. But John seems to focus more on the arrest. And Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. Then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. I learned something interesting today in R.C. Sproul's commentary. I haven't done too much research on this, but I trust R.C. It says he received a detachment of troops, and then there's also officers of the chief priests and Pharisees. So it seems that there's Romans there, there's kind of officers for the chief priests there, but this detachment of troops for the Romans, a detachment apparently is around 1,000 soldiers. I always thought it was maybe 20 to 30 guys going into the garden to get Jesus, but they send out a small army to get one man. And that picture in our head actually changes the story when we read what Jesus does next. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, whom are you seeking? So imagine that 1,000 armed soldiers are coming to get you, and Jesus just steps out right in front of them and says, whom are you seeking? And this is just showing how much resolve he had after that prayer in Gethsemane, where he realizes this is the will of the Father. His will be done. So there's no more, I don't want to say questioning, but there's no more debate in his head. It's resolved at this point. And that's why I love the story of Gethsemane, because it seems like the moment where Jesus is wrestling with how this is going to go about. He's asking God, is there another way? But your will be done. God makes it very clear that, nope, this is the way it's going to be done. And then it's from that point, there's no more decision to make. The decision has been made, and Jesus just walks in it. So it says, "Whom are you seeking?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." And the way he says, "I am he," something you could easily just skim over. But he says it the same way he's had his other "I am" statements throughout John, where it's, "I am the light, I am bread, I am the vine." And this "I am" is actually more like "I am, I am." I butcher it every time, but ego, I, me. And it's the same way that God, I believe in Exodus, it's what he says his name is. I am who I am. Jesus is using the exact same phrase. Before Abraham was, I am. I believe that's the other verse. So what Jesus is saying is, I'm God. To put that quickly. So Jesus says, "I am he," and Judas, who betrayed him, also stood with them. Now when he said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. So here's 1,000 armed Romans. They're probably thinking who's going to be any match for them at this point. They're pretty confident. They're ruling the world at this point. And Jesus, with one quick phrase, saying, "I am he," pointing to the fact that he is God, they fall back and fall to the ground. It's a lot like that moment that we were just reading about, where the Lord opens his eyes and he sees the power of the Lord around him. Then he asked them again, "Whom are you seeking?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I have told you that I am he. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way." He's talking about the disciples at this point. "That the saying might be fulfilled which he spoke, of those whom you gave me, I have lost none." Once again, pointing to the fact that the disciples are given from the Father. They were elected. They were chosen. That's what elected or the elect means, the chosen ones. And he has lost none. This points to a verse that I've been trying to memorize recently. "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. And no one will snatch them out of my hand." And if you're among the elect, if you're saved, you're safe. You don't have to worry that you're going to fall away from God. He's got you. You should worry if it was up to you to cling on to God, but it's more that God is holding on to you. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, and I love this verse, "Put your sword into the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me?" And that seems to have a great idea behind it. Put your sword into its sheath. What is he saying to Peter? He's saying, Peter, you're going about this in the old way, that we conquer with a sword, that we overpower the enemy in our own strength. What is the very next verse? "Shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me?" That's what he was praying about in Gethsemane. He's saying, "Shall I not drink this cup which the Father has given me?" Saying, we're not going to conquer through our strength. We are going to surrender and let God's strength work through us. That verse right there is so rich. And if we could truly understand that, it would solve a lot of our problems. That it's not about our strength and our conquering, it's letting God conquer through us. I was also just reading a verse in, I believe, Romans 16. It's about, I could just pull it up so that we make sure we get it right. That was pretty quick. "The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet." When I first read that, I thought, I'm going to crush Satan under my feet. That's cool. But notice how. the God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. So Satan's crushed under our feet, but it's the God of peace who is doing the crushing. So it's God's strength who works through us. And that's why our surrender is so important. Because without our surrender, we're doing it in our own strength. When we surrender, it puts us in a position for the greatest power that the world has ever known to work through us. So why would we not? Then the detachment of troops and the captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. And they led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. Now it was Caiaphas who advised the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. So there's technically two high priests this year. I believe the Romans put Caiaphas in charge, but the Jews still see Annas as the one who's in charge, because their tradition is once you're the chief priest, you're the chief priest for life. But the Romans kind of interceded there. But they bring him to Annas, showing that they think he's the one who's still ultimately the head. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Who's this other disciple? There's some questions. RC seems to think it's John. It doesn't say, so I don't know. Now that the disciple was known to the high priest and went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. That's why RC says he thinks it's John. John seems to have some connections with them. But Peter stood at the door outside. Then the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to her who kept the door and brought Peter in. Then the servant girl who kept the door said to Peter, "You are not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." So this points back to where Peter boldly was proclaiming, "Christ, I will die for you. No problem. I'm in it." And Jesus responds, "Peter, before the rooster crows, you will deny that you even know me." And here he is denying that he knows Christ, not to some Roman soldier who could execute him, not to the chief priest who's trying to judge him, to a servant girl who, in this day and age, her word wouldn't have even been usable in court. So if there's anybody for Peter not to lie to, it would be a servant girl. But instead, he says, "I am not." And he also almost takes her direction. She says, "You are not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" She's almost leading him. And he follows her lead, a little bit like Adam follows the lead of Eve. Says, I am not, instead of standing up firmly in faith and truth, living in alignment with the word of God. Now the servants and officers who had made a fire of coals stood there, for it was cold, and they warmed themselves. And Peter stood with them and warmed himself. Sometimes I maybe read too much into verses, but this one seems to be pretty clear that it's put in here for a reason. And Peter stood with them and warmed himself. So while Jesus is on trial, where they're going to be making stuff up to put him in chains, to scourge him, to humiliate him, to bring him to the cross, to crucify him, to murder him, Peter is denying that he knows Christ to save his own life. And then even worse than that, he is warming himself in a fire. He is choosing comfort over the cross. He's choosing his own safety and well-being and satisfaction. Comfort is the best way to put it, over the cup that the Father would ask him to drink. Let us drink that cup every single day, and let it be our joy to do so. In Jesus' name, amen.